for me, there's a difference between inclusion and belonging. Forget the dictionary, forget all of those kind of definitions and what you can Google. I define it as a feeling. The DEI brand or the label has been misunderstood, has become toxic. All the things we're talking about here, the psychological safety, creating belonging, workplaces, resonating with customers, making sure that people with different needs are met, the equity side, has kind of got lost. There's this belief that the meritocracy is being overridden by someone's characteristic, which should never be the case. You should always hire the best person for the job. The word accepted, I'd move on from that. I would say celebrated or embraced for all of me, not just the bits of me you like or you can put up with. It's all of me. Let's talk about culture. Let's talk about values. Let's talk about passion and purpose. Put the right foundations in place and again, embed it into your culture so that it survives personality change. When you want to make significant and tangible change, you have to go deep. And sometimes people haven't got the stamina or the appetite to get into the bone. The change I'm hoping to implement and the changes I'm trying to make in my world or my part of the world are for my grandchildren. And I have a chance to set the world in a certain trajectory for them. So it's generational changes we've got to look at. Not for me, not for you, but for them. I want to now start reinventing myself and reinvesting in myself. You only regret things you never did. And I don't regret things I have done. Be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for the people that you love and they love you, and spend time with them. I often say this, I want to go from a gluttony model to a sufficiency model. I find men unpredictable now.
This is the Business Philosopher Within You podcast. I'm your host, Bhavesh Naik. There's a hypothesis I've wanted to explore on this podcast. The deeper we integrate a diversity of perspectives in an organization, the better it performs in the marketplace and the longer that performance can be sustained over time. To help us navigate this theory a bit, I've invited a very special guest to join us. Joanne Lockwood, the visionary behind See Change Happen, transforms inclusive cultures with her unique blend of personal experience and professional expertise. As a transgender woman and a leading inclusive culture expert, she partners with human resources and learning and development leaders to embed equity, diversity, and inclusion, fostering environments of empathy and belonging. I am pleased to have you on this podcast, Joanne.
Bhavesh, thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here. And I've been looking forward to this. So it's
same here.
Let's dive deep and let's see where we go. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's my intent. Yes. And thank you for being here. So, Joanne, you were in the Royal Air Force, Royal Navy. Was it Navy or Air Force?
Royal Air Force. No, it's the Royal Air Force. I did consider the Royal Navy, but my father was in the Royal Navy. But
okay, all right.
There was a bit of pressure to go into the Navy, not the Air Force. But I don't know what it was. I just, at the time, the Air Force seemed like a better option to me. So I chose the Royal Air Force.
Yeah. So you had quite an experience being on the other side. And now you do consulting and speaking and keynote with the workshops and things like that. From the outside in, going into the organizations and helping them bring and embed these kinds of things into their corporate culture or work culture, workplace culture. But you were on the other side at one point. So if you can take us back there a little bit, what was it like to be in the Air Force at the time and part of being that environment, the workplace, and specific to inclusion? What was it like? What was inclusion a part of the vocabulary at the time, or did anyone talk about it?
No, I left school and joined the Royal Air Force. I only did 3 years in there, and I went into civvy straight after that. But 3 years straight from school. When you're 16 and a half, I was when I joined. You want a job. You got no worldly experience. You come from a school environment, college environment. Right. Used to being told what to do, used to being kind of not having a great deal of freedom of choice, even though maybe at that early teen, you can't get a bit rebellious. But I joined the Air Force, and within minutes, it's a very much do it our way. There's no room for dissent. There's no room for creativity. I joined at a time where, as an apprentice, I joined studying radar and radio communications. At that time, the apprenticeship was only open to young men, boys, if you like.
Right, sure.
There was no girls women on our intake.
Uh-huh.
Out of the entire squadron or flight we were on, I think there's probably only one or two people of color.
Wow.
Very, very, very few.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I'm racking my brains to think of more. Even in basic training, there's maybe, I think, one person in our room was a person of color, and one
Uh-huh.
person had an Asian background. So one, put it bluntly, one black person, one brown person, I guess, would be the way of describing it. But the rest, the other 20 of us on there were white. The other 100 or so in our flight were white. So yeah, it was very homogenous. All of the training camp, all of the officers, all of the people we came in contact day to day were white men.
Yeah.
Very few. In fact, I don't remember coming across any women in those roles or any people of color holding rank in the training environment. So at the time, in the early 80s, that wasn't the agenda. There was no talking about diversity. It was, this is the incumbent, and this is the way it worked, and you don't question it because you don't know any different. I grew up in a very white, middle class home and school, so yeah, it didn't seem unusual to me. But I guess the young black man on our in our room or on our course must have felt the only one, and I know. Looking back, there was a lot of we can call it out as racist banter. Yeah, at the time there was racist banter, but at the time that word wasn't. It didn't seem like that. We're just young and larking around, and the young black man we nicknamed Chalky, and that was just. And he seemed quite proud of that nickname, and didn't think any different. But putting a 2025 lens on that now, it's quite abhorrent how we behaved. We were never discriminatory or abusive or inappropriate. It was just the nickname, I guess. It was one of the guys. We all had nicknames. His was Chalky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you always identify, in terms of gender, as so there is an experience of playing out as a male? And then feeling different on the inside. So did that play a role at all in this kind of a workforce culture?
It didn't. It was, so my early memories of my gender incongruence, not sure what's going on in my head, was probably my 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. That's when it first started manifesting itself in my consciousness that I can remember. And so that progressed through my 10s, 11s, 12s, and my 13s, 14s. And at 16, I joined the Royal Air Force. And there were moments in there where I felt some minor suppression going on, because you join, and one of the things at the time, it was illegal, criminalized to be gay, bi, lesbian in the services in the UK. There was no concept of transsexuality or transgender identities in the early 80s, such as that. It was so rare, so minority, we didn't talk about it. But from an LGB point of view, it was extremely frowned on. We had lectures and kind of instructional days where it was drilled into us that being queer was bad. In the same way that drugs, cocaine, any drug use, LSD, all that bad. So it fitted into the thou shalt not ever go down this route path, or there will be consequences. So it was very, very much instilled in me and the other people in my training zone. And I remember we were on exercise. We were going on exercise, and whether it happens all around the world, but the brief was, in order to keep warm out in the field, you should go and buy yourself a pair of women's tights and wear them under your combats, and an extra layer of thermals, an extra layer of insulation. And I remember all of the other lads in the barrack room putting their tights on and doing some stretching exercises and playing around with them. And I just felt, it just felt wrong to me to be that item of clothing meant something different.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something in my head stopped me and blocked me from messing around and joking around with it, to the extent that I was probably the only aircraft person out in the field who wasn't wearing tights under their combats, because I couldn't process that in my head. It was like they were parodying something that was innate and meant something to me in a different way. So I look back on that and think, that was crazy thinking about it. Why couldn't I get my head around it? But at the age of 16 and a half, 17, there was something in there that blocked it. So so you ask, when did that come out? Was there a conflict there? Yeah, there was, but it was soft. It wasn't like it was a big hard thing. It was a kind of just something in here playing on my mind.
Right.
And I'm still talking about it, 40 years later. So it obviously had a pivotal moment in my brain.
Oh, yeah, right, 100%. Yeah. So we talk about inclusion, right, today, and it was probably not that difficult to feel included, because from the outside appearance of you is a male. So they probably didn't do anything to you personally, they just kind of did all these other things, right? So inclusion probably was not an issue with you at that time. Would that be correct?
The criteria was, have I passed the entrance exam? Did I pass the general aptitude? Did I have the right mindset? Would I be prepared to join, take orders, do as I'm told, and fix airplanes and go and kill people? Did I meet the stereotype of being an armed forces person when I was in? Could I pass the tests? Could I learn the equipment? Could I understand electronics? Could I do that? Did I adhere by the rule set they gave, which was very clear, Queen's regulations at the time?
Right.
And was I physically fit enough to complete the training, do my 1 mile run in the time allocated? So it was very much defined metrics, and provided I passed those tests, I was accepted just as another person. They shouted at me and insulted me the same as everybody else. I was it was down to whether I messed up, whether I adhered to the rules, whether I had cleaned my shoes properly, or I had my beret on straight, or I had my bed made properly.
Right.
So it was a very cutthroat, but defined. If you mess up, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
If you adhere to the rules, you're cool. And that was the inclusion.
Right. Now, what fit in? Right. Yeah. While we're on the topic, and now that you actually work with the organizations, consulting with them on inclusion. How do you define inclusion, if there is such a thing? Is there a definition of inclusion?
Yeah, the way I forget the dictionary, forget all of those kind of definitions and what you can Google, Merriam-Webster and all that.
Exactly, and that's what you want. Real.
I define it as a feeling.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I say is it's how you treat me dictates how I feel about you, about the situation. So it's all relative to, I know when I'm treated in an inclusive way because I feel it. So in the same way I feel belonging, I feel included. So it's all about how you're treating me and how I resonate with that treatment. So inclusion is, for me, there's a whole lot of words I could use, but that feeling of being at ease in the environment, not having to prove myself, not having to explain myself.
Yeah.
I'm accepted. Actually, the word accepted, I'd move on from that. I would say celebrated or embraced for all of me, not just the bits of me you like or you can put up with. It's all of me without question.
Yeah.
So I think it's the holistic way of feeling that this place is for me. You care about me and I care about you. So it's a very, very feeling-based thing. And I think that comes out of it. Yeah. And also, it has to be holistic, all of me. It can't just be can't pick and choose.
Yeah, holistic. Absolutely. I love that definition. And definition as in the explanation of it coming from you experientially. So, the way I feel, I love the way you said that. And you also said something about belonging. So I think I've seen some of your videos, and I've watched you in action. And you seem to make a distinction between inclusion and belonging.
Okay, I can give you a really...
Is that true?
Yeah,
Or
I can give you an example of this, because it was an example where it really drilled home to me how I can feel included without belonging. So the example is I was part of a male organization, a male club, for 20 odd years of my life, in my 20s all the way through to my 40s.
Right.
And I've got a good group of friends that I've kept in touch with for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
And even though it's a man's club, they still welcome me as, because I used to be a member. So that's the rules. If I used to be a member, I'm still welcome today. Yeah. So, and then they go out their way to make sure I feel included, that we'll share cars, we'll share lifts, we'll make sure we're going to the places that we can all access. So I've never doubted that I'm included in that club. Never doubted.
Right.
100%, always welcome, always their friend.
Yeah.
But I found myself going to nights out, to pubs, to restaurants, and what I started to feel was I didn't belong. I didn't belong because my values, my life, what mattered to me was different to the group I was in. So the banter, the male conversations, the environment, the talking about the old days, the stories, they were no longer things that resonated with me.
Right.
And I've had this conversation with other women where we've sort of said, well, how would you like to go out with a group of your partner, your husband's friends for the night? Just you were the only woman. Yeah. They go, no, not really. It doesn't feel right. Yeah, sure. It's nice to be asked. Thank you for asking me, but actually, no. Yeah. And that's what I kind of realized. And the other thing I've realized recently is I stopped drinking alcohol 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't now want to go to environments where alcohol is involved. So yes, I'm included. Yes, I'm welcomed. And if I turned up, that's fine. I can drink soda, I can drink something else. Everyone else is drinking. Yeah. But I just don't feel like I belong in that environment. So for me, there's a difference between inclusion and belonging. Belonging is around the culture, it's around my values, it's around what resonates, and whether it feels like a comfortable pair of shoes or it feels like a comfortable outfit. Yeah. Otherwise, you're pushing against it. Know it's not for me. It's alien.
Yeah. And what I can, I'm a cisgender male here, what I can identify with that, and I can, and I love that definition, with the description that you provided, because this applies to almost everyone. There are situations where we feel like we don't fit in or we don't belong. As a cisgender male, I'm expected to love football here in America, drink beer. I hate both of them. And then when you put them together, I'm bored out of my brains. And I've done this with my friends. And I would not want to do it. I don't enjoy it. And I used to do it just to fit in at one point, but now I don't. And if they really are my friends, then they'll still be my friends. If they're not, then they'll say, okay, we won't do anything else, even though and the people who are really my friends, they'll say, okay, fine, we don't have to, do that specific activity, watch football and drink beer, but there are other things we can do together. So, and it takes a while, I think, to grow into that, because it's the feeling of being included and being in that environment. It feels very constricting. It feels, to me, feels very stressful. And my stress is always in my neck and my shoulders. So I feel very tight and tense when so that's when I know that something is not right. But it took me a while to figure out, be in tune with the way I feel. There is a little bit of that self-awareness and situational awareness component to that, right? That knowing what you feel and then kind of, honoring that instead of, counting them out as, something that I'm just kind of making up in my head, right? So I can identify with that. And I think that almost all of us can, because, here we are, 7 billion people on the planet, and not two of us even look alike. So we truly are each one of us is a unique individual, right? So, there will always be a situation with certain groups of people where we don't feel included. Inclusion and belonging, right? So if you go back, if we can go back to that story, when was the time when you started thinking that, okay, this experience that I'm having is not the proper experience? If I can project, is it the experience of being a female in a male body? Is that how you describe it? Or what is that experience?
Well, if you think about, let's talk about culture, let's talk about values, let's talk about passion and purpose.
Yeah.
The whole point of this group of friends is to keep in touch with each other, but also to reminisce, talk about old times.
Absolutely. Right.
And because we were all members of a club. And so I'm still that past member. I'm still reminiscing about old times.
Right.
But a lot of the experiences we shared where I was presenting as male, and it's not, I don't feel comfortable talking about them.
Right.
It's just that I no longer resonate with those memories.
Right.
So I remember the story, but I don't necessarily want to be talking about me. And I think it's a combination of things. That in my early stages, just at the pivoting point when I transitioned, I was seeking validation. I was seeking recognition. I was seeking friendship. Very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what happened was I moved on. I can't blame anybody. It's definitely me moving to a different space where I realized I needed more out of this. And maybe I enjoy going out with female work colleagues, female friends, doing female things, having female conversations. And whether we like it or not, there is a lot of gender around the way we talk to each other, the interests we have.
Yeah.
Even though we want to become gender neutral and make things for everybody, I still believe there's power in single gender spaces, because conversations are just different. And I find myself more comfortable in those environments with other women rather than being with a group of men, because I find men unpredictable now. I maybe it's because I'm, to use the expression, poacher turned gamekeeper. I know what's going on in their heads. I find some of the male banter a bit too. It makes me feel uncomfortable, some of the male banter now, and especially when it's a bit sexist or a bit racist or a bit something, and it's like the group I'm in. Yeah, my values are different now, and those aren't the conversations I want to be having.
Right. Now that you are training, you have a consulting firm where you go into the organization and train them on bringing and embedding inclusion and diversity and equity into the organization. The basic question is why? Why should, let's pretend if it's a business, an organization, a team, a group of people working together, why do you think it's important for them to bring this concept, just bringing awareness of this into the group, and then take any actions with it? What is the advantage to them, the benefit to them?
Well, that's my first question to them normally. Why am I here? And what do I want to achieve? I'm a true consultant. My first mission is to ask questions and get people to think about their own answers. So, what I would hope they say is because it meets our values. We as an organization stand up for the right for fairness, equity, belonging, creating cultures where people can join us and thrive. Sure. It also matters to us because our customers come from various different backgrounds and demographics. Yeah. We want to make sure that we're relevant to our marketplace. We want to make sure that we're not missing out on opportunities. We want to widen our talent pool. We want to attract and retain the best staff. We want people to be in our organization and want to be here. I want them to feel that same passion that we have. So we share these values and goals together. And I want them to want to be here. I don't want to be bringing people
Yeah.
in. So those are the kind of things I want people to say to me. And I because too often it's like, I challenge people and they say, we want to change our gender pay gap. We want to employ more women. We want to be a better company. We recognize we're all white men and we want to have employ some more black people and some more women. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, absolutely fantastic, brilliant. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why? And
That's a great question. It's a great question.
And people struggle. People step out and go, because it's the right thing to do. And I go, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
It is the right thing to do.
Uh-huh.
But how much is it the right thing to do? Because if you have a target, let's say you want to have gender parity, gender equity in your organization by 2030, let's say 5 years' time, how are you going to get there? Are you going to hire more women exclusively? They go, what do you mean? I was like, say, if you hire one more man than women, you're never going to get it. You're always going to go backwards. If you hire the same, you're always going to stay the same. So in order to make that change, you've got to hire one more woman than you hire men, or you've got to retain women better, you retain men.
Yeah.
So something's got to change that dynamic. So are you prepared to invest in that without, so you've got to have a why. You've got to really understand the power of that. And that's not about positive action, affirmative action, positive discrimination or anything like that. It's about recognizing that in order to make that big difference, you have to actually change the ratio. And that means taking some decisive actions.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. People don't always step up for that, or they push back and say, well, it's so difficult to find great CFO women leaders or great black lawyers. I always say, well, if you were a female-led company, you'd have no trouble finding great female CFOs. If you're a black-led law firm, you'd have no trouble finding black lawyers. It's the fact you're a white organization means you have trouble identifying, resonating, and being the employer of choice for that demographic.
Exactly.
I said, it goes back to, you mentioned you're not particularly a football fan, but you participate.
Yeah.
If you're not winning the games, what do? You change your manager.
Right.
If you're not hiring or delivering you on your targets for what you're trying to achieve, then you have to change your manager. It's like you go to conferences and they have all male panels or all white panels.
Yeah.
Often because the person doing the booking and doing the thinking is a white man. If that's not what you want, you have to put someone with a different mindset, different set of blinkers on, who can be very focused, but also authentic in asking. Because if a white man says, look, you're black, I want to bring you on my panel because you're black, it's like, that's a bit of an insult. So you've got to try and, if a black woman said, look, I'm on my own here, come and join me. Someone go, of course I'll come and join you if you're on your own. So there's that camaraderie. So I think it's about looking at your team. And sometimes you've got to be really honest, really authentic, saying, I don't have the skill set to do this. I think through my own blinkers, my own lens. And in order to make this change, I need to be more radical and I need to step outside of my comfort zone, have an honest conversation with somebody and say, look, I need your help. I need your lived experience. I need you to tell me as a white person where I'm going wrong. And that's a brave thing to do for many people. But you have to somehow face it. I can't.
Absolutely. A number of things that you said, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. And so when we ask the question why, I think that I've seen folks, they broadly fall into two categories. There are people or companies who want to do the DEI thing or the diversity, the whole term, right? Because they look good doing it. What I mean by that is PR thing, right? So there was a time when all the big corporations got on the bandwagon. People bring all shapes and sizes of people in the commercials. We talk about gender differences and all the identifications that we bring to the table. All of that into our advertising, and the why there is we want to make more money. It's the revenues, right? So it brings more revenues. That may or may not mean that the culture truly has transformed to allow that, so that people from those backgrounds will feel belonged or a sense of belonging when they work in that organization. So that's one, right? So it's, to me, it's more like a show. You're just showing it, right? And it's convenient. And when it's inconvenient, you step away from it, right? And then you cancel the DEI programs like it's happening right now, right? So now we're not, we don't support DEI anymore because it's not, it's not a thing anymore. But there is a deeper reason that they have sometimes, and the deeper reason is that it's bottom line. When you truly embrace the different personalities and perspectives and gender identities and everything that makes us different and bring us together, to me, it actually impacts our performance. So if someone, an employee, feels belonged or included, so in a workplace, he, she, or they are going to be more productive, right? They're going to show up, whatever job they do. If they're in the back room, they will produce and they'll write more lines of codes, and then they'll bring their heart and soul into it, and then it'll make that code. They'll make that code sing. And if you're talking to customers, right, they will show up in a way that they'll make their customers feel welcome, and all of those things that the job requires them to do. My point is that I think they'll be better performers when you give them an inclusive and an environment of belonging where they come to work, right? So there is a result, and people don't get it. I think that folks, it's like a shoot, right? And AI does this too today, right? And that's an indication to me that what people are talking about, because AI is actually a reflection of what's been talked about on the internet, right? Up to a certain point in time, right? So they always frame it in terms of corporate responsibility, in terms of ethics. And to me, it feels like it's more like a dogma. So I should do this. I should do that, right? Everybody wants me to do it and I'm not doing it. So I'm feeling guilty. And, we have, two black guys and 6 white guys and some other mix of other races and colors and genders. And that's not right because it's not looking good. We're doing something wrong. But to me, it is actually just more basic that we really, if they really believe that the DEI will actually make them more efficient, more effective, and also more happy, then that becomes a part of the belief system or the value system of the organization. And then it goes into your recruiting and your onboarding and your training and how you interact with people and how you hold your Monday morning meetings. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the DEI brand or the label has been misunderstood and has become toxic. I think all the things we're talking about here, the psychological safety, creating belonging, accessible workplaces, resonating with customers, making sure that people with different needs are met, the equity side. Right. It's kind of got lost because I think certain people just associate DEI with hiring. We're prioritizing minority, ethnic people or black people or queer people or just people with disability over straight white men, able-bodied men. It's almost like there's this belief that the meritocracy is being overridden by someone's characteristic, which should never be the case. You should always hire the best person for the job. You recognize that somebody's 100%. Starting point is in a different place, and you may need to provide extra support, or that person comes from a different background to you. They just haven't got the experience, but they can have the experience. So I think what we've done is we've ended up throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, where we sort of say, well, we don't like biased hiring in the other way. We don't like spending money on this. There's too many organizations, government departments, investing in siloed hashtags and parties and celebrations and to celebrate someone's black identity, someone's queer identity. What about the white identity? The white man never gets a look in anymore. So what we're going to try and do here is, instead of doing all that money wasting on these initiatives, we'll cut DEI completely. I think that shows a lack of understanding of the underlying work that's delivered. But that is also maybe part of the problem with many DEI initiatives. They don't actually expose the good stuff they're doing
Exactly.
This
Right.
veneer of identity politics and complex language and
Right.
creating this fear of getting it wrong and berating people if they don't use the right terminology.
Right.
People are kind of scared to talk about things because
Exactly. Right.
I mean, I've tried joining in to a conversation on LinkedIn around race, and I was basically shouted down by a number of people, told to stay in my lane. When I tried to give an example, and I got told, well, I don't need you white-splaining me. I don't need you joining. I go, well, I was trying to clarify. I was trying to find out by asking a question and giving my perspective to allow you to give me something to refer back to. And I thought, it's going to shoot me down. So that thread is only safe for Black people. That doesn't create change if you exclude people from the conversations. I mean, I've been in conferences and in rooms where International Women's Day, for example, coming up on the 8th of March. I've been in those environments where there's 600 people in the room, and you look around the room and all bar 5 people are men. Sorry, all bar 5 people are women. 5 men in the room. Right? You think, I have people look around, how is change going to occur when the people who can implement change are not listening? So we're turning people off. We're turning white people off of racism. We're turning men off from sexist issues. We're turning queer issues off in the minds of straight people. So we've got to try and create this belongingness where everybody feels part of these conversations.
Yes. Yeah.
Decomplexify, if that's a word, decomplexifying or simplifying the language to make sure that everybody feels, okay, I understand what you're saying now. I understand why there's that lived experience, why there's an inequity. But we end up in this broad brush, this complex language, this beating up people with a stick for getting it wrong, rather than opening our arms to everybody and saying, come on, we need you into conversation. Let's pull up a chair. Tell us what is going on in your life as well.
Exactly. You brought up something very important. So part of this, all of this, is, for the lack of a better term, conditioning. So we're conditioned to look and perceive our world in a certain way, and people in a certain way, and that becomes our filter. And when we have that filter on, we make our decisions from that filtering. So, for example, in the example you gave is, I can't find a competent lawyer, a competent Black lawyer, and I can only see competent white lawyers, or if you put in any other categories, right, gender, and the reason may be that there may be some filtering here, and that's going on, or some conditioning that prevents me from seeing beyond that. Right, and that was the point. Right?
Well, I think it works both ways. You can't be what you can't see, and we all see the world through our own blinkers, our own lens, our own lived experience. I freely admit that I see the world through a white, 60-year-old trans experience lens in the world, and because I just don't pick up the news or pick up the stuff that's going on around racial tension. And sometimes I stumble into articles and I think, wow, that never hit the mainstream media. The mainstream media is not amplifying that content. Facebook doesn't amplify it because I'm not clicking on it often enough. I'm not seeing it. So my news feed, my confirmation bias, my all the stuff I'm getting fed is based on what I click on and what I interact with. It's not that I don't want to interact with the other stuff.
That's true.
I just don't do it enough.
Yeah. And those are some dangers. That's a whole different topic, but there are some dangers of AI and algorithms and things like that. That I think the point they're bringing up is that it's kind of not very useful to have these conversations and these discussions online on social media because it's gonna put us in some kind of an echo chamber or some kind of a lane, and we stay within that, and that's not productive. Right, we need to have more of these conversations, right? If not face to face, or this is kind of face to face, but even if it's you're in London or in England, not in London, and I'm here in Washington D.C., and we can have this conversation, but it's still a conversation between two people, right? Trying to understand, each other, right? So
because we can course correct, we can clarify,
exactly,
we can check for misunderstandings, with an open arms and open heart. I can ask you a question, you can do the same.
Exactly.
And I go, well, actually, that's not how I see it. And as long as we've got respect between us, we're trying to find the end result, which is a productive conversation, then we'll meet in the middle and go, okay, we can knowledge transfer at that point. So we don't come from polarized opposites. We come with open arms and sit around the table to find out more. Yeah.
And going to the question of, these are the issues, right? That diversity and diversity, inclusion, and equity, and we want to bring it into the organization. So the question is, and you had 25 years experience doing this. What are some of the steps that so if you were to approach it, someone comes to you and says, well, we want to have DEI in our organization, and then I think you kind of answered this question, but I'm going to clarify that one more time. And so this, what's the first step? What's the first question you ask? First set of questions you ask, and then what is the steps that you take them through to bring this kind of a culture into their organization?
Well, I mentioned it earlier, and I think it's with any consultancy or investigation, it's always the why am I here?
Right.
What's your pain point? What's your pain point? What are you trying to fix? What hurts? How did you get into this mess? Is there a litigation? Has something triggered it, or you just woke up one day and thought we want to be better? It's often a trigger. So trying to get the background of how you got to where you got to where you are now. I think establishing actually where are you now. So you've got demographic
if I
data.
can stop you on that point in the why question, right? I'm curious. What are the top whys you hear from people or the organizations? Number 1, 2, 3, in terms of why they come to you.
Well, because it's the right thing to do.
So that seems to me like it's wanting to fit in even on their part, right?
I think because it's topical and trendy. I think it's maybe that's their motivation.
Right. Okay. Could
everybody
be.
else is doing it. I'm not saying that's the kind of the reason they talk about, but it's contemporary. People are doing it. I've got why we're getting into AI, because you feel like you're going to be left behind if you're the only organization not using AI in some way.
Right.
If you're the only organization that is not focused on creating better cultures, or developing marketing and brand and things like this, then you're going to feel left out. So I'd say a lot of contemporary entrepreneur training, business training, talk about ESGs, talk about all the other aspects of that.
Sure.
The world is talking about ESGs and sustainability and eco and
what's ESG, by the way? Just for clarification, ESGs.
I never know what it stands for.
I heard
environmental.
That term before.
G is governance, I think.
Something to do with sustainability, I'm assuming. Right?
I think so. Yeah, I just say it so often. Actually, I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm in the field.
I know.
We'll clarify the term in the show notes. How about that? Yeah, so.
I know what it means to me. It's all about. There's a whole. I think there's is it the UN or the World Organization has created these. I'm going to guess here 9, 10, 14. ESG goals, and some of them are around governance, equity, inclusion, sustainability, doing the right thing. That's a good. I must Google it, make sure it's in the back of my head, just in case I ever use it again. You shouldn't quote things you don't know the answer to, should you?
That's okay.
But no, I think there's a momentum. So in the UK, we have something called B Corp certification, which is companies who dedicate their profits to reinvesting in the community. So they're basically not-for-profits, but commercial not-for-profits where they reinvest into good values, ESGs and sustainability.
Right.
And part of that governance is all around having good DEI objectives. Our charity commission lays down key elements of DEI. It must be in there, inclusive hiring, things like this. You look at a lot of tenders that are put out from big companies down to little companies. A lot of those tenders are asking you to evidence your DEI credentials. So there's a supply chain thing as well, where it's becoming kind of dominant. Whether that changes, I don't know. but that's where it was. We were seeing this momentum towards
Got
making
it.
sure that, in the same way, if you're a clothing manufacturer, you don't want to be sourcing from factories in China that use child
Right.
labor or use oppressive labor schemes and things.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is make sure your supply chain is meeting your ethics. And I guess the
Right.
DEI question is all around that ethical alignment, that you
Okay.
aren't
Yeah.
toxic as a brand, you aren't toxic as an organization. You're not going to suddenly end up in the front page of Fox News or something for being this bad organization. Then you're tarnished with that as your supply chain.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is that back to backing on ethics, brand, and values all the way down the chain. So I think that's definitely a why for many.
Sure.
I think some people have a family or a friend challenged, had an illness, cancer, recovered, car crash, became disabled.
Yeah.
Or someone they know has just entered into a mixed race marriage or something, or suddenly something triggers them into going, this is important. So I think that's some of it.
Yeah. Okay.
And some of it, maybe they get called out and they're having their market share, or it damages their brand, and they think actually a bit like you go back to Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
A lot of organizations were being called out for not having a good mix of racial diversity in their organizations, and yet they were showing black people on their adverts when clearly no black people worked in the organization. So it's that authenticness of your brand and your values as well. So I think there's a whole load of things in there that it's unique to each individual person, I guess. And without getting into their heads all the time, but those are the kind of reasons. But
those are very interesting. Yeah.
I like to think of the more specific reasons around, the question, we want to hire more women. And that's why I would press, why do you want to hire more women? And often it's because you feel you should. Our board is all white men, and we feel we need more women as a kind of epiphany that they realize they're in a monoculture. They realize that there is a power in having other thinking in the room. So I think some of that, or they employ lots of young women and there's no senior women, and it's creating that disconnect where they realize maybe they're losing staff or not attracting staff because there's a complete imbalance.
So that's the first. So you find out what the why is. Why is it important?
The next thing I think is the understanding where you are. So what is your current demographic makeup? What's your stats? How are you hiring? How are you losing? How are you promoting? Who's getting the pay rises? Who's getting the opportunities? Who's going on the training? Who isn't going on the training? So establishing sort of the data element of it. Because there's no point in, we want to be here, and if you know where you are, and then you're going to track that, you're never going to know whether you're achieving it or going backwards or not quick enough, or what your trajectory is. So I always talk about trajectory and velocity. So it's not about quotas and targets. It's where on the horizon do you want to head, and how quick do you want to get there? Because if you go too fast, you get change fatigue. BAU has to suffer, business as usual suffers. Too much disruption to your organization. You've got other priorities. You've got product launches and support. So you can't go hell for leather unless you've got a limited budget. But if you go too slowly, if it drags, so it's trying to find that right cadence of change, and be able to course correct. You're not going to get the point on the horizon spot on when you're 1,000 miles away. But as you get to within 50 miles, you can say, left a bit, right a bit, and we can put your foot down a bit farther. So it's getting that the vector and velocity and trajectory of where you're trying to head based on where you are now and where you think you need to be.
So what's your reason, and where are you right now? That's the second step.
Then it's what's your vision?
And what's your vision?
So I think as a sort of transformational leadership type model, where it's all about painting the picture on the wall, getting everybody to buy into that picture. Say, it's not what does good look like, it's what does absolutely amazing look, what does fantastic look like, this big hairy goal that we can say, wouldn't that be brilliant if that was our organization? Everyone goes, it would be. So what do we need to do to go from here to there?
Right.
So it's a straight coaching model. What? Yeah,
You're right.
that's
Right.
10.
And
We're
then
at
how do we
3.
go from? Yeah.
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 How do we go?
Yeah.
How do we go to 4? What does 4 look like?
Right.
What does 5
Yeah.
look like? How do we know if we're going to get to 6? What are the barriers? Then we can do some SWOT analysis. We can do some other analysis onto each of those steps, what it means to get there, what the pain barriers are, what the costs are. So we can map that out. And then we've got to put measurements and how we're going to, the KPIs, tracking the performance.
Right.
Because we need to know whether all the initiatives we're doing are actually hitting that goal.
Yeah.
Everything we do.
Right.
Does it have an inclusion agenda? Does it have a DEI output? If it doesn't, it's making sure that, it's making sure that we're mindful about it. And I would say each department head, each director, each vice president of an organization needs to be able to track this in their KPIs and to meet the overall one, which is where corporate Americas end up with this pushback at the moment because they want to strip it out KPIs. We want to strip measuring it. Yeah. Okay, fine. So you're taking all that measurement and metrics out. Yeah. Where are you going? How are you going to get there? Do you care? Yeah. You're going to be going back to the 1970s where you'll stumble into things and you'll have no information about whether it's making a difference or not.
Sure. So basically, your reasons as your pain points, where are you right now, where you want to go, and then obviously there's the roadmap to get there.
Yeah, right? the measurement, the how you're going to collect data, measure it, and evaluate. So the KPI.
Right.
Yeah. Why? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? How are you going to get there? And how are you going to measure it? And then what I would go next to is the comms plan. So you've got to talk about it. And I think you should go public on it. Goals that are published and declared in public get met because you have to be accountable for them. Sure. Publish it to your people. Your people need to know what you're thinking. Otherwise, you just suddenly see all this change and I've got no idea why we're doing that crazy idea now. Yeah. So the comms is really, really important. So you need to have chair of the board, CEO statements, why this matters to me, why our board of directors are behind it, that ownership model, and why we're excited, that whole mission and passion we've got to instill in people and get people to buy in. And then then we're going to a listening phase because we don't have all the answers still. So you really got to, there's a difference between where are we now from a board perspective and where are we now from a coalface perspective. Yeah. It's a lot dirtier and dustier down at the coalface than it is right at the boardroom. Things look fantastic for upstairs, but when you're down at the bottom. So it's then talking to the people, understanding again, baselining, where are we now, what matters to you, because these are big global corporate targets, this big mission statement. Yeah. People want to know what, the with them, what's in it for me. Exactly. That's what needs to be communicated and listened to. And maybe set up forums, where if you have staff networks, employee resource groups, or DEI forums in the organization already. So again, you want that pulse of the organization where you can start getting that feedback. Yeah. And I think then you've kind of got your building blocks and your anchors in place. Then you can start pushing the button on whatever plan you've come up with. So at this point here, it's ideating the steps and the plan. And I would always advocate starting at the leadership tier, making sure your leaders, right from the top of the board, from the top, have all bought in, trained, on message, understand it, and have a commitment. And because you need commitment, and you also got to have courage because there's lots of people now more than ever who are going to try and stop you and down you, and so you've got to have some sort of resilience to handle this stuff. So I think as a leader, you have to have that courage and commitment and buy into the corporate goal, and then you can start pushing this down. Right. So this is not an overnight. This is a year one long thing. Term. Then year two is pushing it down further. Yeah, yeah. I have to believe that part of this process for you is having individual one-on-one conversations with the leadership, top down, and also down in the trenches and all levels. Yeah. In organizations I've done this before, we've set up listening circles. Yeah. So we get different parts of the business to either within their business unit, I'll sit there, facilitate an hour, 2 hours, ask them open questions, maybe pre-map it out, record the calls, process it, analyze it, and feedback. And this is what people are saying. This is what their priorities are. This is what their view of what you're saying is. So you need to balance that out. Use some market surveys, go to customers. If you're big enough to do that. So I think all this first phase is very much a listening and learning and gathering. And otherwise you just head off in the wrong direction. And
Exactly.
what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
Yeah. Joanne, if you've done quite a few of these projects, where do you see or feel a lot of challenges? What's the biggest challenge, and where do you find that?
I think organizations, when they bring me in, expect me to have a magic bullet, or I'll come in with a template and slap it on the desk and say, there you go, you just got to push the button and we're off. And I mean, I appreciate that I'm oversimplifying. I don't think they're actually that naive, but there seems to be this belief that a consultant can change all their problems.
Right. Yeah, in training business, we say, you can't, training is not a solution for every problem, or consulting is not a solution for every problem, right?
No. And I think it's recognizing they have to do the long haul, do the tough work, get into the weeds. It may be that they're not the right team. It may be that they've got to look long and hard, and they may have to have some tough conversations with people who are obstructive or toxic in their culture. And they may need to, dare I say, manage people out or reassign them, move them out the way, identify where people have problems. And I often, you can Google this term, gifted jerk. Some people are too big to fail, and top salesperson, top this and top that. Yeah. And often these people have an ego which is causing disruption in the whole environment. So one person can poison the water for everybody. So some of those things aren't going to be easy conversations, and it's you either got to try and bring them on side with you, or you've got to have these tough conversations. This may not be the best place for you in the future, and and that may well be some of the C-suite are not the right people to lead us forward in this new generation of organizations. So I think it's recognizing that you may not have the right team in place who are buying into it, which is part of the challenge. When you want to make significant and tangible change, you have to go deep, and sometimes people haven't got the stamina or the appetite to get into the bone and make those deep cuts. But I think the other challenge is that the world changes, and this is a commitment for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, a long-term commitment. And it's people expect quick results, or they want to move on to something else that's shiny. There'll be an acquisition, there'll be a merger, there'll be a new product launch, the world will change, there'll be a COVID pandemic. But going back to the COVID pandemic, people were able to radically change over the course of a week.
Right. Yeah.
We know
Isn't
we can
that crazy?
Do it.
Yeah.
And now we're drifting back to our old ways. We're forgetting some of the benefits. And some things needed to go back, some things didn't. And I think what we're trying to do is these broad brush approaches where we're making these bland statements that say it's better back in the office. And I'm not saying everything is better working from home, or everything's better than working in the office, but it's when you hear the solution as the only answer to the question, how do we fix this, is get back in the office is the only solution. So how do we nurture people? How do we mentor people? How do we help people in their early careers? How do we have these conversations? How do we have these water cooler conversations that add value? I sometimes wonder how we quantify the true value of those versus let's just pop onto Teams, let's have a quick catch up at lunchtime, let's have an off-site meeting once a fortnight or once a month. So we seem to hold a lot of value in these conversations, which I sometimes wonder whether it's insecure management or insecure leadership who are not feeling well equipped to manage disparate teams.
And I think that's the reason why you were saying the top-down approach, where you actually have the buy-in from the leaders, and that is so absolutely necessary it's critical to taking on initiatives like this. Otherwise, it just won't work. any change, you deal with changes that are actually quite significant and quite deep. But any change in organization, any transformational change will require a commitment from the leadership. Otherwise, it just won't work. It just, I don't think, bottom up, I don't think it can, but the odds are against us.
You look at some of the new generations of startups, tech startups and things like this, and they're working with teams spread around the world. We've got developers in India, developers in Estonia. We've got finance people running out of Lithuania. We've got all these different teams. Okay, those teams themselves may be in little pods, but we don't all need to be in the same place. And I think it's disingenuous to say that people only work effectively together. There are different paradigms, different ways of working.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the only answer isn't sit in the same office on the same day, in the same hours.
Absolutely.
We talked about, 5 years ago, we were already talking about presenteeism. I'd come into the office, I'd sit at my desk, because if people saw me at my desk, they thought I was busy, and I feel busy, I feel more productive, and no one's going to question me if I've sat at my desk.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going back, that's what we're going back to with the presenteeism. We left behind because people realized it was about output, not about input.
Yeah. Exactly. Great points. And of all the initiatives that you've taken on, what is your best shining example of how it should be done? Some situation where everything kind of, or almost all, nothing ever goes 100% right, but things kind of fell in place and you were really proud of the achievement. So what was the achievement and how did that come about?
I was going to say, by the very nature of what I do, a lot of what I do is front loaded, and I don't often get to see the end result. And unfortunately, I've been in so many situations where we've had a great start. I'm thinking of one company I started working with in the early stages of COVID, where I trained all of their leadership team across the UK and into Ireland. I think I ran 20 odd online sessions with 10, 15 people on each session. And I was coming back every 3 months, running a top up. And I was doing other stuff. And they had a big EDI playbook. And I could see how it's dovetailing in. They were doing surveys. They were measuring the impact of the change. They were quoting people. And they came back to me and said, look, this is the impact of what we've done together. And we can actually measure that.
Right.
And then people changed. The business got merged with somebody else. They split it out. The people who I was dealing with went to other companies. And the next thing I hear, people were leaving because the culture had gone back to where it was. It got back to a bro culture. Very, very masculine orientated, and all the work we'd achieved had been thrown away. So I've seen lots of examples of it starting well. With a sound playbook, going through the steps we've talked about, whether I was instigating the entire project or whether I was dovetailing in to an existing momentum. But I would say most of them end up where another change happens and it disrupts it. So it's sad in the case I'm just talking about, because they were doing some fantastic stuff. But I don't often stick around for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and most EDI managers or EDI directors don't stick around that long either. So that's why.
Right.
Once to use an English expression, the king is dead, long live the king. Once the new king comes in, all the old rules change. The president has changed. Suddenly, all the momentum the previous administration had gets thrown in the bin.
Right. Yeah. So true, actually, especially in America right now with our new administration.
I'm sure it happens in the UK with change of government, change of momentum. It's hard to see projects through that are more than the lifetime of an administration, political administration, because it so affects the culture of organizations and the priorities and economic downturns. And all you can hope to do is put the right foundations in place and again, embed it into your culture.
Yes.
So that it survives personnel change.
Absolutely. Right. And as an optimistic person, I'll always be an optimistic person, no matter what. If there's bombs falling around me, I'll be an optimistic person. I have to believe that we are making positive, as humanity. We're going through some painful changes at one level, but I think we're also moving forward in the sense that we're at least we're having conversations about this that we didn't before, right? 50 years ago, as we were saying, 1980s, we weren't having these conversations, but we're talking about it. So, and we're talking about it in at least in some corners of the planet, we're talking about in a respectful way, and we're trying to come to, a good faith common ground from where we can, we can evolve and embed these kinds of things. You talked about the foundation. I think that if 1% of that becomes a part of our deep conditioning, if our belief systems change, and we begin to operate from that more enlightened, for lack of a better term, perspective, and if we expand our horizon just a little bit, each one of us, I think that's a tremendous progress as humanity.
Yeah, I mean,
and as
human
workplace.
evolution. We don't go back. You look back to the 1800s and poverty and squalor. Even the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, the poverty, the disease, the inhumane conditions that many people lived in. We've done a lot to eradicate a lot of that poverty. It's still there in areas, but the way I try and describe it is, on this infinite journey of human evolution, we look over our shoulders and we've come a huge distance with all the things we've achieved. Yeah. But then you look at the horizon and we think, well, we're no closer to the horizon. We've still got lots to do.
Sure.
I think you just got to believe that we are this little slider in that infinite journey.
Absolutely.
And we just got to take it on, leave it better than we found it, and keep passing on to the next generation. Because the change I'm hoping to implement and the changes I'm trying to make in my world or my part of the world are for my grandchildren. Because my children are already old enough that it's too late. The world is already defined.
Right.
My grandchildren who aren't born yet come into a world in 3-4 years' time. And I have a chance to set the world in a certain trajectory for them.
Absolutely.
So
right.
It's generational changes we've got to look at. Not for me, not for you, but for them.
Yeah. Point well taken. Very well said. Coming back to the journey of transformation and transition. If you look back at yourself, you were 16, 17 in the Royal Air Force, and here you are today. As we go through life, our life changes us, right? And it's more profound in your case because you had this gender transition that you went through. But for all of us, in a deep way, we don't remain the same person that we were. Not even just physically, emotionally, psychologically, and so many other ways. So, what is the difference between Joanne today and who you were in the Royal Air Force when you started out at the age of 16?
Well, that's
if you can point out one thing.
44 years of life, I guess. I've messed up a lot. I've learnt a lot. I've matured, obviously, and I think as I turned 60 a couple of weeks ago. I think you get to this point in your life where, thank you. I think you get to this point in your life where your trajectory and what matters to you changes. And in my early stage of my life, I wanted more. I was in this growth zone. I wanted family. I wanted wealth. I wanted property, nest building. I wanted to acquire. Right. I think we all go through that curve when we're young. We want stuff and we acquire. Then you get to this point in your 20s and 30s where you consolidate, you make use of the stuff you've acquired, the family, whatever. Yeah. Then you get to your 40s and you realize that you've got too much stuff and that you need to start losing some of the baggage you picked up. Right. In your 50s, you start thinking, well, okay, we've kind of become lean and mean and I want to start focusing on me now. I need to find my own self. Right. And what I think in my 60s is I want to now start reinventing myself and reinvesting in myself. I don't want to give up. I've got hopefully 15, 20 years of good legs and brain I can do stuff with. Yeah. So what I want to do now is I want to start thinking about what I can do next, my next phase of my life. Sure. AI, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That I'm not saying I want to go back to being 16 again, but I think, wow, if I was young again, what I could do differently.
Yeah.
So I think rather than wish I was younger, say, I can do this now. So
Yeah.
I think Joanne today is a 60-year-old Joanne, having been through that growth, been through that acquisition, been through that consolidation, been through that shedding, and now thinking, okay, now what do I want to do for the rest of my life? And let's make it happen. And maybe when I'm 70, I'll have another decade of epiphany and do something different. But but I don't look back with any regrets. I don't look back with any sorrow.
Yeah.
You only regret things you never did. And I don't regret things I have done.
Yeah.
And if I haven't done stuff,
Yeah.
I can do that now. I can, if I regret something bad enough I didn't do, I can do it.
You can do it. Yeah. And on that note, we're all going through so many changes. Everything is changing around us. And yet there is something that kind of doesn't change. It's like this part of us that, we often say that everybody tells me that I'm getting older, but I really don't feel old, right? I look in the mirror and I look older, but I don't feel old. So there's an ageless part of us here somewhere that doesn't age and doesn't change. And it still serves as like the ground that roots us, or that's one of the ways to put it. So where do you go? What do you do, metaphorically and literally, to root yourself in the midst of all these changes? What's your foundation? What's your ground?
Well, currently, I want to be. I often say this. I want to go from a gluttony model to a sufficiency model, where I'm not driven by wanting too much. I'm driven by wanting just enough. And I don't know what just enough means. Sustainable, 3 months.
Yeah.
I can see the end of the year out, whatever that may mean. And I value time with my family now. I value time with my wife.
Sure.
I value time to shut the front door, close the blinds, and just be in our family unit. I think I value that more now than I've ever done. And so for me, that has given me belonging, fulfillment, satisfaction in my life. Whereas for many, many years in my life, I felt I needed external stimulation, and I realized that I didn't. Well, maybe I did at the time, but looking back on it, I probably didn't. And going back to the sufficiency model, be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for the people that you love and they love you. And spend time with them, because
absolutely,
the old adage is life is too short and to regret. So let's spend time with people you want to be with.
That's great. I love that. If someone wants to reach out to you, first of all, what are some of the things that you are trying to reach out to people for? What's at the top of your mind, and how do they get hold of you? How do they reach out to you?
Yeah, thank you. So as a professional speaker, so I speak, I educate, and I consult. So those are the kind of three strands of my business. So speaking is mainly online, sessions like this, keynote speaking on stage. I run workshops on EDI and trans inclusion and other things, and I also consult, as we talked about. I host my own podcast, so that's if you're wanting to find out more about me, tune to my podcast. I've got a YouTube channel I'm putting lots of content on, and this year I'm going to be building out some e-learning videos and some programs which I'm going to push out through a content management system, a learning management system. So I'm going to be talking about that. So reach out. Drop me a DM. LinkedIn's always the best place. Joanne Lockwood.
Sure.
Or search for me.
We'll put all the information in our show notes. And I think your website is seechangehappen.co.uk.
SEE. Changehappen.co.uk. And I've also got joannelockwood.co.uk.
Okay. All right.
If you drop my name into Google, then I'm on the first 4 or 5 pages pretty much. So you can find me there.
Yeah. And I've been to that website, and I can say it is very inspiring, and so much value there, so much information. I highly recommend that you check it out. And Joanne, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me and having this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute honor. Thank you.
couple more minutes. I just wanted to ask you, I'd just like to kind of get feedback on if there's anything that we can improve in terms of the big part of this is, how I interview and what kind of questions I ask and those kinds of things. So is there anything that I could have done better, or from the time that we touched base to the time that we set up the conversation?
Without make it sound like an anticlimax, using the word nice, nice is very, you met my expectations. I had no positive or negative feelings. It was,
okay.
I guess, because it met my expectations, I'm not even thinking about what could be done differently because it was good. Thank you.
There were no expectations, right? Yeah.
My expectations were, you're a professional. I do this, you do this. I've been on loads of them. So this was, as I expected, smooth, seamless. Tech issues happen, but nothing untoward.
Sure. And the last question I'd like to ask is, what was it like being on the other side? I'm always kind of mindful of that. When I show up, I feel in a certain way. I'm trying to always gauge. When I'm asking questions, I'm taking it through a certain life experience and the memories and things like that. What is it like to be in the seat talking to me?
So because I host my own podcast, I'm used to sitting on your side of the fence and thinking ahead and constantly trying to keep the conversation, thinking about this, thinking about the value of trying to do this. So from a guest perspective, it's nice to better lean back and enjoy the ride, watch the scenery. Because I do a fair few of these with various hosts.
You do. Yeah, you do it once a week or something like that, right?
It's nice to have a different set of questions, a different perspective, a different angle.
Yeah.
So what you were talking about aren't necessarily areas where I spent a lot of time talking before, because people will latch onto one thing about you.
Yeah.
This was nice to talk about what I do day to day rather than who I am, which is quite nice to talk about my brain rather than my identity. So it's nice to cover different topics. It's nice to speak them out loud, because sometimes you have these thoughts until they come out of your mouth, they don't exist. And sometimes you say them and go, yeah, that's good. I like that. I could say that again. And So I found it very good to be a guest. I like being a guest. It's nice to keep my hand in and be challenged.
Good. Yeah, and I think you answered the question. But the question I'd like to ask is, what's different on this podcast than the other podcast that you've been on? And I think you kind of answered that. But if there's anything that kind of sticks out,
you're very easy to talk to, very calm, very relaxed, very knowledgeable. You've got your own value add in there as well. Sometimes I get interviewed by people who are just sucking out of me. You're adding value. We're having a discussion, which was nice.
Right.
I enjoyed that. I didn't feel that I was struggling on my own. You were joining in. So sometimes the questions are good. They were clear. A lot of depth to them, a lot of variety. They were talking about what my core topics are, my subjects. You weren't out of my lane or anything like that, which is nice. No, absolutely good, absolutely fine. So
good.
And how was I for you?
You were great. I absolutely enjoyed talking to you. If I can be honest, I'm always being careful with certain words and what I should say, what I'm not to say. Especially the certain transgender terms and things like that. I had to educate myself a little bit. Is it okay to say it like this? Is it okay to ask about gender transition and things like that? So, and I've had these conversations, and I hang out with people of all sorts of all gender identity and things like that. And still, we're being recorded, so I'm more conscious about it. So there was a bit of the self-consciousness on my part, but that's me. You were awesome. You're great. I think you live and breathe what you do, and you live up to the bio that you put together, which is that you do this for a living. You this is your profession. You are a speaker. You are a consultant. You are a workshop facilitator. You bring about changes. You do all these things, and what makes you an authentic person to do this is your own personal story. and you are open to talking about that, and you are okay talking about this, and you're not shying away from it, and even I think that may be your gift, in the sense that we often say that we don't go through deep transformation, we're talking about psychological, internal deep transformation, unless and until we hit something really bad, right? There's a Rumi quote that says that your pain is where your treasure is, right? That unless we find ourselves in suffering or pain or some deep doo-doo type of situation, we don't do the big things in life that we should be doing, asking deep questions, doing the work inside, looking down, looking deep down, and going through that transformation. And I've gone through that transformation a lot, it's psychological transformation. So, and we'll talk about that on your podcast. but you live it, and to me that is admirable. That even if someone has gone through that transformation inside, I don't talk about it, but you're out there talking about it all the time, and that to me is absolutely inspiring, and it's very moving that someone is living openly with this transformation. It's called spiritual transformation, psychological transformation, and there is a physicality to it in your case, but it's a difficult thing to do, to live it out, because it's a courageous thing to do, and you do it all the time. So, and then that came through, I think, in our conversation. So I really enjoyed that. That was a long answer to a short question.
Well, thank you for investing time to get it right. From an etiquette point of view. And you didn't come across rehearsed or performative.
Good.
You came across very natural.
Yeah.
You didn't seem nervous about talking to me or asking me any questions, which is great, because I don't want anyone to be nervous around me. So
right.
Yeah. But so you were very good, and
good.
But I'm prepared to go places where other people aren't. So some people, just because I talk about it doesn't mean other people do. So everyone's unique. But I'm very comfortable talking about anything really.
Awesome.
When you tell your story enough, it's like salami slicing. When you've done enough little slices, you don't realize how far you've got. You share a bit more, share a bit more, share a bit more. Oh, you think, oh shit, I've shared the entire salami.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's just you just get used to sharing, and if the environment's safe and comfortable, then I don't mind.